Hello, welcome to Practical Parenting. My name is Keiley Pedro and I'm your host today. Practical Parenting is here to support families who are struggling with their children to become the best parent that they can be. We are going to break the story that I believed, and I'm sure you do too, of the perfect parent and create our very own guilt-free story. So today I have Judy Arnall with us from Professional Parenting. Judy is a certified brain and child development specialist and master of non-punitive parenting and education practices. She is the parent of 5 adult children and is a best-selling author of 5 books: The Last Word on Parenting Advice, Unschooling to University, Discipline Without Distress, Parenting with Patience, Plugged in Parenting, and Attachment Parenting Tips. Wow. Welcome, Judy. You are going to speak to us today about positive discipline. And I understand you have a presentation for us.
Yay. I do. Thank you for having me, Keiley. Do you want me to go to screen share now?
Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay. Now, whoops. Now I have a lot of slides here and I'm not going to show them all. But I loved what you said. I was a perfect parent. And then I had my first son. And then just when you get the handle of how it works and you think, yes, I got this, then you have another child and they are totally different. So I have 5 children now, like you said, and I'm learning still all the time. But I've been facilitating parenting for about 23 years, and a lot of the non-punitive parenting tips are in my books. So I'm also certified in brains. So I'm going to spend this morning talking about brains. These are brain cells. And because it all boils down to the computer of people's bodies, the brains. And I think if parents know what to expect at what age, they can make very good parenting decisions. So I'm not going to really tell people how to parent this morning. I'm going to explain what positive discipline is, why it's rooted in the brain science, and also offer a few tools on each age group for how to handle misbehavior. So this is my gang. And this is my gang now. So I raised 4 sons and a daughter. They're all adults now, and with no punishment. So when people say, well, what do you mean no punishment? I mean, no timeouts, no smacking, no taking away cell phones, no taking the door off their rooms. We did none of those. And then parents go, well, what did you do? Right? So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what I did. A lot of my tips and of course I hung around parents that did non-punitive parenting too. And we came up with ideas. We had support groups. I put a lot of the ideas into the book, Discipline Without Distress. But a lot of parents came to me and said, well, Judy, how do I get to that point of positive discipline when I am so angry? And a lot of times parents are okay if children don't know better and they misbehave. But when they think children do know better, and deliberate defiance is one of those big ones they bring out the big guns for. How do I deal with my anger before I can get to non-punitive discipline? And I want to talk a little bit about that today, which is the book, Parenting with Patience. So let's move ahead here. Okay, so what is positive discipline? Because you find the term all over the internet, and there are lots of interpretations of it. But what the science shows is positive discipline is non-punitive parenting. So 30 years ago, parents wanted their kids to fear them, so they behave. what that did was it impacted communication. And why do we need communication now? We need communication because our kids are living in a different world than we did 30 years ago. Most of where our kids play, work, socialize now is under parents' radar, invisible to them. So parents need good communication lines to their children. And you can't have good communication if you have fear in that parent-child relationship. Now, one of the questions I often get is, well, but the rest of the world's going to teach them punishment and consequences. And I say, yeah, that's fine. Your children are going to learn consequences out there in the work world, in school, but those adults are not building a relationship with your child. You are building a relationship, and it's a lifelong relationship. And guess what? It's a love relationship, which means in a love relationship, there is no basis for fear or punishment, even when it's adult-child or parent-child. So I often say, if you wouldn't do it to your partner or your mother or your sister or your neighbor, don't do it to your kids, right? So that's kind of the scale. So positive discipline is non-punitive. And right now, worldwide, I'd say non-punitive parenting is about 15% of all parents practice it, which isn't many. As we get the brain science out there, hopefully it will get out there. Right now, there's a really good study that came out from Harvard this week on how spanking children actually activates the same parts of the brain that physical abuse does. So we're getting that information out there. Here's an example I talk about in my book, Parenting with Patience. My little 4-year-old, he wanted some chips one day, and it was 10 minutes before dinner. And I said no. And he was mad. So he took this bag of chips up to his bedroom, opened the bag, spilled the chips all over the rug, and stomped his foot into every chip, smashing it into the rug. Now, Keiley, how do you think that would make you feel?
I would be cross. I'd be angry. Yeah.
Absolutely, right? That's an example of deliberate defiance. And I was livid. If I was a spanking parent, boy, I would have let loose. And I was very tempted to. But it was one of my better parenting moments. So that's why I'm telling you about it is I didn't. I turned around. I said to him, I am so angry. I need to take a time out.
Wow.
And I went downstairs and I had a good cry. I called my partner. I calmed down. And if that's one takeaway I'd like you to get from the session is take care of your emotions first. You need to be calm to make good decisions. And when parent and child's emotions are running high, somebody has to be in control. That's you. You've had a lot more years experience to do that, and their brains are still undeveloped. So that's you. So take a timeout. And you know what? The best way to teach kids about taking a timeout is to model it, not force them into it. So take your time out, calm down. There is no research out there that supports that kids are going to forget if you take too long to calm down yourself and come back to the issue. You can always revisit what happened with your child and ways to fix it in the future. Okay. So I did that. I calmed down, came back up. He calmed down. And then in his little 4-year-old way, I showed him how to clean up the mess. And we brainstormed some ideas, what he could do next time for his anger, and also when he wants to have a snack before supper. So that's what we call problem solving. Okay, so I'm going to just scroll through. Let's talk about the brain. Now, this is a picture of the brain. The brain across everybody in the world develops in the same way. It develops from the brain stem on up, from the bottom to the top, and from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. And the front of the brain, this blue part, is where all the reasoning, the consequences thinking, the planning, the decision making is all in that front part. And that's the last part of the brain to develop. So this little 4-year-old who sprinkled his chips all over the carpet, he's pretty well developed in this part of the brain. He doesn't have much of the blue part yet. So he didn't go up there thinking, ooh, if I sprinkle chips all over my rug, I'm going to get into trouble. He just let his emotions go in the moment. And I wouldn't expect that from a 13-year-old, but I would expect consequential thinking from a 13-year-old, but not from a 4-year-old. So this chart kind of shows you, this is the development of that blue area, the frontal cortex. And especially the really frontal area is called the prefrontal cortex. That develops in the teen years. So from age 6 on, the blue part develops. And from 13 on, that last front part of the blue part really, really develops. So you can see here, this is the development of executive function, which is self-control, self-discipline. You can see from birth to age 3, there's not a whole lot of that going on. And that's why when you tell toddlers, let's say they're touching something, they're touching a beautiful glass vase, and you say, no, we don't touch. And that toddler's looking at you with their hand up and their hands go into the vase while they're watching you. So what that is they know the power of no, but they don't understand the consequences yet if they touch that vase. And they don't have the self-control to pull their hand back and not do something. Everything they do is doing something, right? So yes, they are starting to learn the power of the no word, but they don't have the self-control to not do what you asked. So that's why, see, children from birth, let me get this, birth to age 5, when you tell them to do something, they listen or do it about 40% of the time. So 60% of the time, they're not going to do it. And that's a development issue. That is not a discipline issue. That's something that comes with age. So you can see the yellow column is the big leap of development of self-control from age 3 on up to age 6. And then the brain takes another leap in that area from age 13. And then that big leap here at age 17 and done at age 25, right? This is from the Harvard Center of the Developing Child. So this is why children in a lot of countries, I know it's different in some countries where they start school earlier, but in a lot of countries, children don't start formal education until age 6. And that's why, is because they need enough self-control to sit in circle time, pay attention in classroom, not hit their little friend, line up properly, and listen. And they don't really have a good grasp of that until age 6. Okay. So babies' brains, is brain cells. Babies are born with 100 billion of these brain cells. And for the most part, they're not connected to each other. So the brainstem and the cerebellum are really well developed for motor skills. So they can move their hands, and the brain cells keep their hearts and lungs going. And babies have very good developed occipital lobes. So they can see all across the room, almost at adult levels. Where when they grow into toddlers, the temporal lobe, this middle pinky orangey lobe, is becoming very sensitive. So that's where they're starting to learn language. Memories start happening about age 3, 4, and emotional expressions. That's why they're so prone to having all these floods of feelings and yet have no control over them. So when you say, no, you can't have that cookie, they're exploding in tantrums. They're crying, they're screaming, and that's normal. That's development. But, by age 6, I would expect that those children don't have tantrums anymore, or they can express themselves in words because now they have the words to use. So this is, so babies, this area is well developed. Toddlers, this area. And then this is the preschooler area. So from age 3 to about age 6. And this is where they're starting to learn a lot of language. They can express themselves in words now. But again, self-control comes in the frontal lobe development, which is age 6 to 12, and then 13 to 25, actually. Okay, so knowing that, what are the best discipline tools to use for each age group? We recommend from 0 to age 3. Yes, you can teach your child, but don't expect them to understand or get it. So when you say, no, we don't pull a dog's tail, here, pet nicely. If you say that 20 times a day, eventually those brain connections are going to make sense. So lots of repetition helps brain cells connect. So you want to do some teaching, but don't expect compliance. The other thing we do is we childproof. We say, you put anything away that is dangerous, that is something you don't want your children to get into. Childproofing is so important because, and we do it from the year's birth to age about 4 or 5, because by then they understand that if they drink bleach, they may die. They get it by then, but until then, they don't understand that. They don't understand those consequences. So childproofing is very good. Supervision, constant supervision. You have to supervise children, even in the bathtub, till about age 8. But generally, until about age 10, children need constant supervision. And that includes outside. So if you're spanking your child to prevent them from running into the street, that's not a good tool because of their lack of self-control. They're going to run anyways if there's a reason to run. Your job is to supervise and make sure they don't run into that street. So for 0 to 3, you can redirect them from something you don't want them to do to something you do. You can childproof. You can supervise and learn child development, because it's so important to understand that you can't punish a child for what their brain can't do. That's not fair. Okay, so then age 3 to 5, one of the best tools there is, again, offering choices. So giving children choices between 2 or 3 options, and make sure you're happy with all choices. So you don't want to say to your child, do you want to go to bed now? You want to say, would you like to walk to bed, or would you like me to carry you to bed? Right? So either way, they're going to bed, but giving them a choice takes out that power struggle, right? Other great tools for preschoolers are still, childproofing the environment. If you don't want your child to be on screens too long, then, just set a timer so it goes off or something like that. Now, one thing about non-punitive discipline is you always have the right to say no. Absolutely. It's not permissive. Say no if you really don't want your child to do something, or you don't want to do something. Now, your child also has the right to react back. They may be unhappy about that. So when my child threw the chips all over the floor, he was mad when I said no. And feelings are okay. So feelings are on the inside. Feelings are fine. You can feel all your feelings, but behaviors are what's on the outside. That's not okay. It's not okay to be angry and throw your chips on the rug, right? It's okay to be angry and stomp your feet, right? So I often advise parents, everybody gets angry in our family, kids too, and they model what we do. So I yelled a lot. I was a yeller, and my kids became yellers until they got older, and we talked about problems rather than yelling about them. So I advise parents, we have a no list of what kids can't do when they're angry. No hitting, no biting, no pushing, no throwing, no screaming, but we don't have a yes list. Yes, you can stomp your feet. Yes, you can lie on the floor and hammer your hands and cry. Yes, you can cry. Yes, you can scream if it's in the bathroom. So children need to know what to do instead of us always telling them what not to do. So the yes list, and make sure it's okay. Every family has a different yes list. For example, in my family, I had teenagers and they would get frustrated and oftentimes they would swear. For us, that was okay because sometimes I would do that. But it depends on every family. You have different rules. Okay, so for preschooler tools, it's offering choices, having acceptable ways for them to express anger, and still childproofing.
Yeah.
Now, what do you do for ages 6 on up, I would say? So when they start understanding consequences, things like that, the number one discipline tool is called problem solving. Mm-hmm. Now, yes, this takes time, but you're going to spend the time either enforcing punishments or working out problems like the adults you want them to become. So problem solving is just looking at their needs, looking at your needs, sitting down together and coming up with solutions that meet both needs. This is the best skill to teach your child because they will have the skill moving forward in their relationships with their partners, with their future bosses, teachers, coaches, and other people. The rest of the world can issue consequences to your children. They can punish them, but you have a vested interest in your relationship to teach them how to work out problems with respect. Yes. Some days, I tell you, with 5 kids, that's all I was doing was problem solving. But it's like putting money in the bank, it grows. And oftentimes, I'll tell you an example. One day, 2 of my kids were home from university and they wanted to do their laundry. And they were fighting over who got to use the washer first. And they know the problem solving process because we've done it so many times. And I just said to them, okay, guys, you have a problem, work it out, solve your issue. And I left the room because I did that. I did those years teaching them and they did, they worked it out. And that's the beauty of problem solving with your child. So by age 6, they have enough word power to understand, to talk to you, understand. They have enough self-control to follow through with whatever they decide. And it's a great skill to teach them. Okay, this is pretty well. I've talked about all this stuff. We're going to the end here. Okay, Keiley, do you have any questions from all that have come up?
So far, no questions at the moment. It's just interesting to hear about the choices that that you're saying to give your children. I think for me as a parent, I give my children choices, but then when their grandparents are there, they think that I give them too many choices. So it's interesting how I have to then deal with them and say to them, actually, this is the way that we do things, and we give choices, and it gives the children control as well, that they feel that they've got some control over the situation.
Yes, and absolutely. And you're building a relationship with your children. The children are building a relationship with grandparents, right? I often get this with partners where, and I dealt with it too. I didn't do timeouts, but my partner did timeouts. And he quickly learned that he wasn't getting the kind of reaction back from the children that I was getting. The kids would come to me with their problems and come to me with sharing their feelings. They weren't coming to him. And I quit nagging him, because that's no way to change your partner's parenting. Best way is to model what works for you. And then they look at you and go, that's working for you. And then hopefully they'll catch on. So he did change to a more non-punitive way of parenting, but I mean, the kids love him and respect him too. It's just that we have more open communication, and that's what you get if you put punishments away, and you get a beautiful relationship with your children all through the teen years. I love the teen years because of that, because we could talk. We didn't, once in a while, we had an odd, little thing, but I'm talking maybe once a year, once every 2 years. In North America, parents of teens have an average of 22 fights a month, 22 clashes a month.
Wow.
What that tells me is that they're punishing the kids and the kids are pushing back. So if you take punishment out of it, two things happen. Your children don't give you attitude anymore because they have nothing to push back. If you work out problems with them at every stage, and sometimes what you decide isn't going to work and you have to go back to the table and work it out again. We've done that many times over bedtimes and driving and lots of issues. But it's that constant ability to problem solve and go back to problem solving that lets your kids know that you're on their side and you're their mentor and guide and their parent and their friend too, right? So that's kind of, and sometimes the best discipline is just a hug. If you don't know what to do with your children, start with a hug. And then the teaching sinks in. So parents often say to me, well, aren't you rewarding that behavior if you're giving them a hug? And I say, no, because the teaching's going to come later. But you all have to get to a point where you calm down and you can start talking, right? Now, remember, 3 and under, forget this. Just child-proof and supervise, because they don't have the words yet. But remember how the brain grows, right? You look at your child at 1 and you think, wow, they don't know anything, which is true. They don't. And your child at 3, too often parents look at a 3-year-old and say, oh, I got to teach this now. I got to nip it in the bud or it's going to grow. If my child's hitting when they're 3, they're going to still be hitting when they're 15. Not true. Not true. The brain develops. They get self-control naturally, whether you teach it or not. So you don't have to teach all those lessons when they're 3, when their brains don't even accept it yet. You can teach later. When they're 7, they get a lot. They understand a lot more. And even more when they're 13. Then they have self-control. By age 13, your child should not be hitting when they're angry. But they have 13 years to learn that, right? And then by 18, they are a wonderful friend and you're so proud of them and you have good communication. Okay, so that's kind of everything. And I think I asked my kids, are you happy I didn't punish you? And they didn't come back and say, no, we wish we were spanked more. So that's it in a nutshell.
I think the interesting thing is your knowledge about the brain and knowing that we could be some parents spanking, some parents shouting, disciplining a child who hasn't even got the capacity. Yeah, it hasn't developed. And that's so unfair. It's so unfair. That's the one thing that I think that struck me. Definitely.
Yeah, it is really unfair. And it's part of the result of we don't teach child development in schools. I know we don't in North America, and 90% of all people are going to become parents. And they don't tend to take parenting classes because they look at it as stigmatized. And then if they go on the internet and they read books, I've read about 500 parenting books, and no wonder parents are confused. Everything's on the continuum from yes, punish to don't punish. It is so confusing. So, but there are one thing, if you look at the research, there's a lot of research out there that shows that punishment does affect communication in relationships between parent and child. There are no research studies out there that show that punishment enhances parent-child relationships. So I urge parents, look at the research, understand brains, and get yourself calm first, and you'll make good decisions.
Yeah, I like that. That you said earlier about the hug, that a friend of yours said that the hug is rewarding. But then I totally hear what you're saying about the calming down, because when you're in the moment and your temper's high and their temper's high, you don't know, it's hard to control yourself, let alone control them. So that calming down is a really good idea.
Yes, and I have lots of ideas. I have a blog. This blog, judyarnall.com. One blog post is 70 ways to calm down in the moment. So make sure the kids are in a safe place. If you have to put them in the crib for you to get a grip, do it, right? So my favorite way is to go in the bathroom and yell at the toilet and then flush.
All the way.
Right? Anything you can calm down that doesn't hurt anybody or hurt anything is what you want to do. So calm yourself down first and then go back and deal with the situation.
Wow. Okay. So our viewers can go onto your site to get that information, and I'm sure much, much more.
Yes. Yep. That's the best. I have a lot of articles on there on non-punitive parenting and especially brain development. What age can kids do their laundry? What age can I leave my child alone for the night? If people want to contact me, I can send them a little chart it's a 12-page chart of what kids can do when. So, yeah.
So if they go to the website, they'll be able to contact you through the contact form there. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Is that the www.judyarnall.com?
Yep, that's the one. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today, Judy. There's so many things to take away, and I think the brain development is the biggest takeaway. Just to think about that and how we treat our children according to that. I'd like to thank our viewers for listening, and to ask you to stay tuned for the next amazing interview in today's lineup. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Bye.